20 years ago, a brutal monsoon swallowed the outskirts of Delhi. Hidden within that torrential storm stood the Rathore mansion, an isolated fortress of wealth. Inside, Rajveer Rathore, one of India's most formidable industrialists, paced the halls. To his family, the crystal chandeliers and roaring fireplaces projected absolute security. But Rajveer was exhausted, carrying a silent panic that his name could no longer protect them. Behind locked doors in his private study, he moved quickly. He pulled an old metal box from behind a bookshelf, securing a property deed and a final message for his 5-year-old son. He placed a sealed envelope on his desk, carefully marking it with 3 words, "For my heir." Next to the envelope lay an antique brass key. Rajveer gripped the cold metal, knowing this was the only physical link his son would have to the life they were about to leave behind. Rajveer understood the reality of his situation. No amount of influence could stop the violence arriving at his door tonight. His empire was already falling. His sole remaining duty was keeping his bloodline alive. The illusion of safety collapsed at midnight. The mansion instantly lost all electricity, plunging the massive dining hall into total darkness and leaving the family with only the rhythmic sound of heavy rain. Far beyond the marble balconies, headlights cut through the storm. A synchronized convoy of vehicles silently surrounded the perimeter of the estate. Men wrapped in thick black raincoats poured out of the SUVs. Moving without a word, they swept their flashlights across the grand exterior, methodically infiltrating the property line with military precision. The perimeter was gone. With every exit watched and every light extinguished, the walls that had protected the Rathores for decades were now closing in. With his enemies inside the gates, Rajveer led his wife, Ananya, and young son Arav to a massive antique painting. He pulled the canvas aside, revealing a set of cold stone stairs, a forgotten underground tunnel known only to the family. He reached into his coat and pressed the brass key into Ananya's trembling fingers. He gave her one instruction: she had to protect it, no matter the cost. Looking down at his frightened young son, Rajveer forced a smile. He wiped away the boy's tears, reminding him that a tiger never shows fear, and promising that his father would always remain right beside him. Then he stepped back. The heavy, ancient stone doorway slid shut with a deep echo, leaving them alone with a single flickering lantern. By sealing that wall, Rajveer permanently severed himself from his family. He anchored himself in the mansion to absorb the full force of the coming assault, buying them the minutes they needed to disappear. Back upstairs, the invasion was underway. Armed mercenaries tore through the grand corridors, kicking down wooden doors and shredding centuries-old paintings as they hunted for the child. Suddenly, the destruction paused. A solitary figure stepped into the grand hall. Polished leather shoes echoed against the shattered marble, stopping completely as a black umbrella was slowly lowered to reveal the leader. Rajveer stood waiting, a heavy revolver resting at his side. The faceless man demanded the key, dragging the family's trusted head of security into the hall, a betrayal that finally explained how the mansion's defenses were broken. Rajveer simply laughed. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a decoy key, held the gaze of his enemies, and threw the metal directly into the roaring fireplace. As the mercenaries broke formation, Rajveer raised his weapon and fired a single shot toward the ceiling, shattering the grand chandelier. It crashed into the flames, igniting the room in a wave of fire and smoke. The fire surged through the hall, swallowing the Rathore name in a wall of heat. The chaos was absolute, leaving the shadows of the mansion wide enough for a mother and child to vanish. 2 decades later, the gunfire of that night has faded into the heavy traffic of a modern neighborhood. Yet a persistent gray rain still washes over the city. At a small local garage, the workday begins. A young mechanic steps into the gloomy morning, using grease-stained hands to heave open a metal shutter. He lives in total anonymity, his face obscured by the shadows of a quiet life. But resting against his chest, hanging from a worn leather cord, is the exact same antique brass key that survived the flames 20 years ago. His routine is broken by a ringing phone. An unknown number flashes on the screen. On the other end, an elderly woman's voice, his grandmother, delivers a calm command. It is time to come home. In a single moment, his constructed life is pulled apart. No matter how deep he buried his name, he cannot outrun his own bloodline. Stepping back inside the garage, he notices an anonymous courier envelope waiting on his workbench. No return address, no sender. He opens it and pulls out a faded family photograph. The edges are scorched. His father, Rajveer, stares back from the paper, but the face of the child has been violently ripped away. Turning the photograph over, he reads a single mandate handwritten in Hindi. Your legacy is waiting for you. He accepts his identity in silence. Locking the shutter for the last time, he mounts his motorcycle and speeds off into the heavy rain. Miles away, beneath the rotting floorboards of the abandoned Rathore mansion, the dust is finally disturbed. The sealed envelope Rajveer hid that night remains untouched, waiting to be claimed. The engine roars as he turns away from the life he built. 20 years of silence have ended. He is finally moving back toward the ruins of his name.